My name is Dorinda Ellsworth. I'm 81 years old. I've lived most of my life in Willow Shade, Tennessee. A quiet little town where folks wave from porches and everyone knows what kind of pie you bring to the church potluck. On the outside, my life looked like a pretty postcard. A white farmhouse with blue shutters, a yard full of petunias, and a Sunday dress always ironed crisp. But that's the thing about postcards. They only show you one side. The glossy one. The lie. Today, I stood behind the pulpit of Gracewood Baptist Church, the very place where I was baptized, married, and nearly buried in secrets. The sanctuary was full. Not for a funeral. Not for a wedding. But for something else. Something that hadn't happened in this town before. People came because they thought I was going to share memories. Maybe tell a few sweet stories about faith and family and good Southern living. But the story I brought with me was soaked in shadows, bruises, and silence. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I hadn't planned to speak at all. I've been quiet for 67 years. Got good at it. But a few months ago something changed. I found an old photo album while cleaning out the cedar chest in my attic. Tucked between 2 pages was a slip of paper, yellowed, creased, and dangerous. And it was a list. My list. Names, dates, places. I'd written it when I was 14, using a dull pencil and my trembling hands. It was the only truth I had back then. I stared at that paper for hours and I felt it. The ache I had buried beneath casseroles, hymns, and smiles. And I knew it was time. I didn't need a reason anymore. I didn't need anyone else to say it was okay. I was done waiting for the world to understand. It was my story. And I was going to tell it, not because I needed to be believed, though God knows I deserved that, but because I needed to stop carrying the weight of someone else's sins. I stepped up to that pulpit, holding the slip of paper between my fingers like a relic, and looked into the crowd. My grown grandchildren sat near the front. People who had known me for decades. The Bakers, the Hensleys, even Pastor Royce. Most of them looked at me like I was made of lace and good manners. They didn't know. I took a shaky breath. My voice quivered at first. When I was 14, I said slowly, my father told me the Bruises meant I belonged to him. The silence that followed was so loud, it rang in my ears. My name is Dorinda Ellsworth, I continued. And for decades, I buried my shame beneath Sunday dresses and saccharine smiles. But not anymore. A woman gasped. Someone dropped a Bible. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a small cassette recorder. It was old, dusty, and barely held together by tape, but it still worked. I clicked the button. A grainy voice filled the room. His voice. Don't tell nobody, the recording said, low and cruel. Or you'll wish I just left you with bruises. Gasps echoed around me like thunder. My hand didn't shake anymore. I stood taller. I had carried his voice in silence long enough. Now I was turning it loose, right here where it all began. But I wasn't finished. Because this wasn't just about what happened back then. It was also about what had happened last week, when I found out the same evil had wormed its way into another young girl's life. Right under our noses. In our church. And I knew without a doubt who was behind it. Someone they all trusted. Someone they'd never suspect. Someone I was about to name. But not yet. Because first they needed to hear what happened to me. They needed to understand how darkness hides behind clean colors and Sunday sermons. And they needed to feel every scar I had tried to scrub away with silence. The room held its breath. I opened my mouth. And then, from the back of the church, a man stood up. His face drained of color. He knew. He knew I was about to say his name. And I smiled just a little. Because this time, he didn't get to finish the story. I did. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. What would you do if someone you loved carried a secret like this? Let us know below. You'd think I would have run when it first happened. But when it's your own father, the lines between love and fear twist into knots you can't undo with logic. His name was Horace Blevins Ellsworth. Folks called him Deacon Ellsworth, or Brother Horace. He was the kind of man who tipped his hat to widows, brought sweet tea to shut-ins, and quoted scripture like it was stitched into his skin. But that skin of his, beneath it lay a monster. We lived on a patch of land outside Willow Shade, a 3-bedroom ranch house surrounded by nothing but dry fields and God's sky. My mama, Marlene, passed away giving birth to my younger brother Asa when I was 8. After that it was just Daddy, Asa, and me. People said Daddy was grieving, that he'd lost the light in his life when Mama died. But I saw it differently. He didn't lose the light. He snuffed it out, slowly, cruelly, in the way he looked at me once Mama was gone. The first bruise didn't come from his hand. It came from the weight of a stare. I remember the day it changed. I was 14. I had just started wearing real brassieres instead of the training kind, and Miss Evangeline from church had given me a second-hand Sunday dress, yellow with tiny white daisies. I remember spinning in it, feeling pretty, feeling like a girl ought to. That night after supper, I was washing the dishes when Daddy walked in behind me. He didn't say a word, just stood there, watching. Too long. When I turned around, his eyes weren't like Daddy's anymore. They were hungry and hollow, like he'd been starving and just found a piece of meat. "Take that off," he said. "You don't need to be showing your shape in my house." His voice was quiet but sharp. I remember backing away, confused. I didn't mean nothing by it," I whispered. He stepped closer, gripped my wrist. And that was the first time I felt it, the kind of touch that doesn't belong to a father. Later that night, after it all happened, I crawled under the porch and cried until the dirt soaked into my skin. The next morning I went to school with a fresh mark on my forearm and a lie already prepared. "Oh, I was trying to reach a jar and fell." Nobody asked twice. Back then, folks didn't ask girls like me many questions. And I had already learned the cost of telling the truth. I started keeping track. Little notes tucked into my school books, behind loose floorboards, even inside the hymnals I used at church. Places he'd never look. I called them breadcrumbs. So if I ever disappeared, maybe someone would follow the trail. But no one ever did. He was smart too. He made sure it never looked like abuse from the outside. No black eyes. No broken bones. Just whispers at night, fingers gripping too tight, threats that made my blood run cold. "If you ever speak on this, Dorinda, nobody will believe you. You'll be sent away. They'll call you a liar. A crazy girl with a dirty imagination." Sometimes I almost believed him. But there were moments, flickers of rebellion inside me. Like when I wrote in that little notebook I kept in my sock drawer. Or when I stared back at him during dinner without flinching. Or when I prayed, not for rescue but for revenge. I didn't want someone to save me. I wanted the day to come when I'd stand tall in front of a room full of people and tell them what he really was. But dreams like that, they don't keep you warm at night. By the time I was 17, I had perfected the art of survival. I wore my hair long so it could cover the bruises on my collarbone. I smiled through church services like my life depended on it. And I kept every note, every journal entry, every scrap of truth, buried in a shoebox in the crawlspace. I called it the coffin, because that's where my innocence went. But something else lived in that box too, something that hadn't died. Proof. Real proof. Things he said on tape. Letters he thought I'd burned. Even a photo he took that I never meant to find. Years passed. I left Willow Shade at 18 under the guise of going to nursing school. I never looked back. I built a life in Knoxville, then later in Asheville. Married. Raised 2 daughters. Lost my husband to cancer. Buried my youngest in a car crash. Life didn't spare me its tragedies. But I kept the coffin. Moved it with me every time. And when my older daughter, Clarabelle, asked me to move back to Willow Shade so she could care for me in my old age, I knew it was time. Because Horace Ellsworth had died a decade ago. But his legacy hadn't. There were girls in this town now. Young, bright, full of fire, and I had reason to believe one of them was being hurt by the same kind of evil. Only this time it wasn't behind a farmhouse door. It was behind the pulpit. And the man doing it was the same boy my father once mentored. A man named Samuel Clay. Pastor Samuel Clay. Beloved, respected, and, if I was right, just as monstrous. Which is why this past Sunday I played that recording. My father's voice. My truth. And why this coming Sunday I'm going to play another one. One I recorded 2 weeks ago. One that proves Samuel Clay isn't the shepherd they think he is. The cassette is loaded. The batteries are fresh. And if he dares to deny it, I'll make sure the whole church hears what he said. Word for word. In his own voice. Just like Daddy. If you believe stories like these deserve to be heard, please hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to follow the rest of this journey. The truth is only just beginning to rise. There's something about church on a small town Sunday morning. The sunlight spills through the stained glass windows, painting rainbows on the pews. The choir sings just off-key enough to sound human. And everyone without fail is on their best behavior. Men straighten their ties, women wear hats like crowns, and the children sit with sugar-sticky fingers, pretending to listen. Pastor Samuel Clay loved that kind of theater. He stood tall, with the kind of posture that said he belonged above everyone else. His sermons were smooth as butter. His smile practiced but warm. If you didn't look too closely, you'd think he was born with a halo. But I saw something different. Something I recognized. I saw my father's shadow. Samuel wasn't always a pastor. He grew up here in Willow Shade. I remember him as a boy, 10 years younger than me. Hanging around my daddy like a stray dog looking for scraps. Horace mentored him, taught him the ways of men. I used to catch Samuel watching me with a strange, quiet intensity. I'd shiver, and not because I was cold. Years passed. Samuel left for seminary school, then came back to Willow Shade as the town's golden preacher. Everyone called him a blessing. A miracle worker. A man of God. I called him something else, though not out loud. Predator. 2 months ago, I noticed a girl named Lydia Hart lingering around the church kitchen after service. She's only 14, with freckles scattered across her face like God took extra care painting her. She reminded me of me. I'd see her carry dishes while Samuel hovered nearby. His hand brushing her shoulder in a way that made my stomach twist. Then one Sunday Lydia didn't show up. I asked her mother why. She's been tired, her mama said. Just needs rest. That was all I needed to hear. The next week, I saw Samuel slip into the church office with Lydia. I followed, slow and quiet like an old fox. I pressed my ear to the thin wooden door. His voice was soft but firm. "You're special," he said. "Don't let anyone tell you different." The same tone my father used when he said I was his favorite girl. I didn't wait to hear more. I went home that afternoon and pulled out the dusty shoebox I kept under the loose floorboard in my bedroom. Inside were old tapes I'd recorded as a teenager. My father's voice threatening me, manipulating me. Proof I had locked away like poison. And something inside me snapped. I bought a new voice recorder the next day. Black. Easy to hide. I walked into that church office later that week when no one was around, slipped the recorder under Samuel's desk, and left it running. When I came back, the tape was full. Listening to that recording was like standing on a railroad track with a train coming straight at me. His voice dripped with the same sickness I'd lived through. The flattery, the intimidation, the threats masked as kindness. It was all there. He wasn't just a reflection of my father. He was the echo. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt steel run through my veins. This was my chance. My moment to do what I should have done years ago. I'd been silent too long. So last Sunday I stood up in front of that congregation and played the first tape. My father's voice. I watched the crowd unravel. Faces twisted in shock. Whispers rippled like fire. And Samuel went pale as a ghost. 'Cause he knew. He knew I had something else. Something worse. After church, I found a note slipped into my mailbox. No name. Just 4 words written in thick black ink. Or you'll regret it. I laughed when I read it. Cold, tired laugh. Because I've already lived through my worst regret. And I survived. But the note didn't scare me. Fueled me. This coming Sunday, I'm not just going to play his recording. I'm going to read aloud a letter Lydia wrote to me last night. It's short. Scrawled in shaky handwriting. And it's the kind of letter that will crack this town wide open. But I have to be careful. Because Samuel isn't just a man with a Bible. He's a man with power, with people who'd defend him no matter what. And I've lived long enough to know that men like him don't go down without a fight. So I'm planning. I'm hiding copies of the tapes in 3 different places. If anything happens to me, they'll know where to look. And when they hear what he said to Lydia, there will be no mercy for him. But I can't shake this feeling. That someone is watching me. That someone, maybe Samuel himself, is waiting for me to slip. And I won't. Not this time. Because the next words I speak will end him. If this moment made your heart race, click like, tell me your thoughts in the comments and subscribe. The next moment will reveal what's on that second recording. And trust me, it's worse than anything you've heard so far. The night before Sunday service, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because I was ready. I lay in bed, listening to the old clock in the hallway tick like a slow drumbeat. The world outside my window was quiet. Willow Shade always sleeps peacefully, even when secrets scream beneath its floorboards. I stared at the ceiling, thinking of Lydia's face, her wide eyes full of questions she wasn't old enough to ask. She had slipped me the letter after Wednesday service, pressing it into my palm with fingers like bird wings. She didn't say a word. Just looked at me with that same fear I used to wear like skin. That letter. It broke something open inside me. It read, "Miss Dorinda. I don't know if I'm bad or if he is. I feel like I disappear when I'm in that office. He says I make him feel alive. I don't want to go anymore. But if I tell my mama, she won't believe me. I think I'll stop going to church. Maybe that'll make it stop. Please don't tell anyone. Lydia." But I was going to tell everyone. Because silence is the rope they use to hang girls like Lydia. The next morning, I wore a lavender blouse and a skirt with tiny daisies stitched into the hem. It was nearly identical to the dress I'd worn when my father first took me apart piece by piece. I didn't choose it to honor the memory. I chose it to bury it. One final time. I packed the voice recorder and Lydia's letter into my church tote, beside a worn Bible and a butterscotch candy I kept for the children. I had also made 5 copies of the audio file from Samuel's office and tucked them into envelopes marked with 5 names. People in that congregation who I trusted, who had known me long enough to know I didn't make things up. I arrived early. The sanctuary smelled like furniture polish and lilies. The choir practiced softly. Pastor Samuel stood at the altar, straightening his tie in the reflection of a stained glass window. He didn't look at me, but he knew. I could tell by the way his jaw locked. He was sweating. That was new. As service began, I took my usual seat, 3rd row, right side. My hands rested gently on my lap, but my heart thundered like war drums. I watched Lydia walk in with her mother, who looked tired and distracted, flipping through the bulletin like the words would change. When Samuel stepped up to preach, his voice cracked at first, only slightly, but I heard it. His sermon was titled, "The Weight of Redemption." He should have called it, "The Last Lie." Let him talk. Let him spin his little parables and metaphors, painting himself as a humble shepherd tending to lost sheep. It would be the last time anyone heard him preach. Because just as he bowed his head to close in prayer, I stood. I didn't ask permission. I didn't need it. "Before we say amen," I said, my voice firm but calm, "I have something that needs to be heard." Whispers flitted through the room like sparrows. Samuel looked up, finally facing me. His mouth opened, but I was faster. "Press play." His voice filled the sanctuary. "You're not like the others, Lydia. You're mature. You understand. You feel it too, don't you? This isn't wrong unless you tell someone. And we both know you wouldn't do that to me." "Right." Gasps tore through the crowd. Someone dropped a hymnal. Lydia froze in her seat, her face drained of color. Her mother turned toward her, horror slowly overtaking confusion. Waited for someone to speak, to accuse me, to defend him. But the tape spoke louder than anything I could have said. Samuel tried to interrupt, rushed toward me, hissing under his breath, "You don't know what you're doing, Dorinda." I stepped back, raised my voice. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said. "I'm making sure the devil doesn't hide behind stained glass anymore." I pulled out Lydia's letter and held it high. This is what silence breeds. This is what happens when little girls are told to respect their elders while those elders take and take and take. 2 ushers moved toward Samuel, uncertain. The congregation sat stunned, unsure if they were witnessing blasphemy or salvation. And then Lydia stood. Her voice shook. "It's true," she said. "He touched me. He made me think it was my fault." Her mother burst into sobs. A wail, low and sharp. That was the sound of a heart breaking. That was the sound I once made beneath my father's porch. It was happening again. But this time there were witnesses. Samuel backed away, hands raised like a man under siege. He looked at me, pleading now. "Dorinda, please. Don't do this." I walked down the aisle, slow and steady, the way you do when you've waited a lifetime for something. I stopped right in front of him. And I said, "You don't get to beg for mercy when you never gave it." Police came 15 minutes later. Someone had called them the moment the tape started playing. Samuel didn't fight. He was too stunned. Or maybe he knew it was over. They led him out in cuffs. I watched from the doorway of Gracewood Baptist Church, sunlight warm on my skin. People swarmed me after, hugging, crying, thanking me. But I didn't want praise. I wanted change. I handed out the 5 envelopes, one by one. Each person who received one promised to make sure the evidence never disappeared. The truth wasn't mine to protect anymore. It belonged to all of us. That night, Lydia came to my house with her mother. She didn't say much. Just sat beside me on the porch and leaned her head on my shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. I took her hand. "No, baby," I said. "Thank you for trusting me. Because sometimes you don't save someone. Sometimes they save you." If this moment gave you chills or courage, press like, share your heart in the comments, and make sure to subscribe and like. It's been 7 weeks since that Sunday. 7 weeks since the mask fell off Pastor Samuel Clay in front of the very people who once called him a man of God. The world didn't end. But Willow Shade cracked wide open. There were investigations. Questions. More girls came forward, 3 of them. All under 16. All with the same look in their eyes I once had. Each story different but the pattern identical. And every time I heard one, I wanted to dig up my father's bones just to spit on them. Samuel denied everything at first. Said the recordings were fake, that I was confused, senile, vindictive. That I'd always been odd. But the truth has teeth when you finally let it out. The recordings held up. Lydia's letter, her testimony, held up. The others, brave enough to stand in court, even with trembling hands. And Samuel. He pled guilty the morning his trial was set to begin. I was there. Sat in the courtroom with Lydia and her mama on one side, and my own daughter, Clarabelle, on the other. Clarabelle cried the whole time. She didn't know about my past, about the tapes, the abuse. I never told her. After the service, she looked at me like she'd never really seen me before. "Mama," she whispered, "how did you carry this for so long?" And I said, "Because I didn't know I was allowed to drop it." That's the truth of so many women, isn't it? We carry. We bury. We smile through funerals, cook for weddings, sing in choirs, and walk with broken bones no one can see. But not anymore. Not for me. The church took a break after Samuel's arrest. The deacons tried to keep things afloat, but it felt empty without trust. Eventually, the building was turned over to a community board. They're turning it into a center for young girls, offering counseling, mentorship, space to breathe. I visit once a week. I bring lemonade and listen. Sometimes that's all they need. Someone who listens without blinking, without doubting, without rushing to fix what can't be fixed. But I tell them this. You're not broken. You're bruised. And bruises fade. Last week, Lydia stood behind the same pulpit I once did. She told her story. She trembled, stopped halfway, but she finished. And when she did, I stood and clapped. So did the whole room. Because Lydia's heart is what survival looks like when it's given space to grow. Afterward, she gave me a hug so tight I thought my ribs would crack. Then she said something I'll carry with me forever. "You made the road, Miss Dorinda. I just walked it." But she's wrong. I didn't make the road. I just stopped pretending it wasn't there. That same day, I visited my mother's grave for the first time in 20 years. Her tombstone sits beneath a weeping willow, its bark cracked and gray. I brought yellow daisies like the ones on the dress that changed my life. I didn't say much, just stood there. But in my heart, I whispered, "I told the truth, Mama. I told it all. There's no statue for women like us. No holiday, no headline, no parade. But there's peace. There's power. There's freedom in standing tall, even if your knees shake." As I walked back to my car, I felt a breeze lift the hem of my skirt. The same wind that once swept over me as a girl. But now it didn't chill me. It warmed me. It told me I was finally home. And as I drove away, Lydia waved from the church steps. A new kind of preacher, I thought. One with scars instead of sermons. But sermons fade. Scars teach. And this town. It'll never be the same again. Not because I exposed a monster, but because I reminded them what silence costs. And what truth, however late, can still save. If this story moved you, please take a second to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're a voice for the voiceless. And by being here, you're helping someone feel a little less alone. Thank you for listening.